All right, we're back. The New American Realist Show here with Charlie Fuquay. He's out here, local Arkansas guy. I know a lot of people may trigger by his hat. Make America Great Again. I listened to his video. Actually, it was Spotify with Brian Norris, that's a co-host of the New American Realist Show. I know some of you guys have listened to us talk about Ukraine war and what's going on overall with the craziness of today's events that continue to take place. And Charlie, I'm going to let him introduce himself because his resume is pretty big and I don't want to miss something. I think it's perfect timing to bring him on to talk about monetary policy, banking system scam that his Spotify video that he put together with Brian ended up being spot on. Just about, when did you guys record that?
Oh, it's been a couple of weeks ago.
Couple of weeks, but you basically said what was going to happen, and now we are here. By the way, I will copy, paste that show with Spotify with Brian Norris on this video so you guys can take a listen, because we're going to keep this one a little shorter. So without further ado, Charlie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, I want to tell you I'm old, okay? I'm 73, okay? And I discovered what I'm going to share about the banking system in 1980. I was working on an MBA degree at the time, and I had to do a term paper on government regulation of some private industry. And so I did my term paper on government regulation of the banking industry. And that's how I got started on this whole thing. And that was in 1980. So that's been what now, 43 years ago? So it's been my passion since then to understand how banking works and to try and make it as simple as possible to explain to people how it works. Now, give you a little bit more about myself. I am a retired attorney. I have been an Arkansas state representative. I just got term limited out. I was the Independence County Republican chairman for the county I live in, here in Batesville, Arkansas. And actually, I'm kind of glad I got term limited out. I wanted to turn it over to some younger guys. So that has happened, and I think we have greatly upgraded in this county by getting rid of me.
But I doubt that based on what I already heard from that chat with Brian.
Okay. Now, first of all, I want to say why I'm a Republican. Okay? It's not that Democrats are wrong and Republicans are right. It's that Democrats are evil and Republicans are the lesser of two evils. Now, I wish I could say something better about my party than that, but I really can't.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
So I'm promoting Republicans because I believe they're better than Democrats. I would rather have a good Democrat. I guess there's no such thing as a good Democrat. But people like Mitch McConnell, to me, they are worse than Democrats. Because they're disguising themselves as Republicans, and they don't really stand for Republican principles. I do not like a politician that is in it to advance himself. I believe politicians should be in it to help the country.
And we don't have too many of those nowadays,
We
that's
don't.
for sure. Is there one?
Well,
you can think of?
I can think of Matt Gaetz. You know, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's a congressman.
We lived in Florida, so I definitely heard of him. But as you know, now I'm a political atheist. I just had enough with the nonsense.
I can't blame you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, you told me you wanted me to talk about the monetary system.
I do, because again, going back the way you broke it down in that 1 hour podcast, I found it as good, if not even better, because you put it all in 1 hour, because you're a historian. And you understood it. It was kind of like, I compared it to Mike Maloney's Secrets of Money, the way you were trying to explain what the real money is. And you broke it down within that 1 hour, which we're going to keep way shorter on this clip.
Yeah.
but I just really enjoyed it, and I think this is, again, I want to repeat this, perfect timing based on what's happening now with the bailouts, as we the people are bailing the banks out. Again, since 2008, now we're seeing it again. A lot of us are not shocked by this, and I would like your take on everything that just took place and the fractional reserve system. How is it done? U.S. Treasuries and bonds. If you can break it down 5 to 10 minutes for us, I'll leave the mic off to you.
Okay, I'll do that, but before I start that, I just want to state a position on something. I am opposed to thermal nuclear war that ends life on planet Earth. Now, some people may think that's a radical position, but that's the road we're headed down right now in the war in Ukraine. We, the United States, have no strategic interest in Ukraine. We should not be involved in that war. And, you know, I know you're Croatian, and Croatians often don't have real high opinions of Russians, and I understand that historically. But I want to say, in this war, I believe the Russians are the good guys, okay? And it's hard to understand that unless you know the history. And I'm not going to go into that in this broadcast. But this war is all about banking. That's what it's about. It's about the power of the international bankers. And Russia and Putin are opposing the power of the international bankers. And that's why Russia and Putin are the most hated person and the most hated nation on earth at this point. Now, I don't want to take too much time on that because I want to go into the banking system.
Got it. I just want to chime in on that one just for 1 minute. I am Serbian, born and raised in Croatia, and Russians, we've been following what's going on in Russia very closely.
You need to.
I am very much aware, and me and Brian did a lot of videos on that. I'll send you some today that you can see. I am 100% agreeing with you, just to make that clear. What's going on in Ukraine, I believe we should stay out. It's none of our business. And there is a lot about that war that a lot of people don't know about. But I'll post a couple of links, what me and Brian talked about on that one.
Okay. I'm just going to say this. The people of Eastern Europe hate Russia because Russia imposed communism on them. And communism is awful. But Russia's not a communist country anymore. Now, I know most Americans don't know that, okay?
No, they don't. No.
Now, I want to go ahead and get right into this money system. Okay?
I can't wait.
Okay.
I can't wait.
Okay. What the money system we have in the United States is what is known as fractional reserve banking. Now, fractional reserve banking originated in ancient Babylon, okay? And I want to explain its origin and how it came about, because if you understand it in Babylon, it makes it easier to understand it here. In Babylon, the money or medium of exchange was grain, predominantly wheat. So in Babylon, they had a grain bank where people could take their excess wheat and deposit it for storage if they didn't need to eat it, plant it, or spend it at that time. People would have excess. When they deposited their grain in the grain bank, the grain banker would issue them a CD, a certificate of deposit, a receipt for the wheat, okay? Now, over time, the tendency developed in the Babylonian economy that when somebody wanted to spend their wheat, rather than, for example, taking the appropriate amount of wheat to the shoemaker and pay him in wheat and have him make you shoes, they could just take the grain banker's receipt. He would issue them in 1 bushel, 5 bushel, 10 bushel, 20 bushel, 1,000 bushel denominations. So you could pay for almost anything in the grain banker's receipts. They began to circulate in the Babylonian economy as if they were the money. Now, they weren't the money or medium of exchange, it was wheat. But these receipts circulated as if they were the money. Now, the grain banker at times would loan out his own grain, earn a little interest on it. Say somebody needed wheat for planting. come to the grain banker and say, hey, if you'll loan me 10 bushels of wheat at planting time, I'll repay you 11 bushels at harvest time. So the grain banker would earn a little interest off his wheat. Well, one day somebody came to the grain banker and said, hey, I want to borrow some wheat. Well, the grain banker looked at his inventory and all of his wheat was already loaned out at interest. But he had all this other wheat that people had deposited. And then the borrower said, hey, you know, I don't want this wheat to plant. I don't want it to eat. I want to spend it. So rather than actually giving me the wheat, could you just give me a receipt for the wheat? And the grain banker thought, you know, that wheat just sits there. People continually spend my receipts. Who would know if I had more receipts outstanding?
Boom, that's how it started.
Boom is right.
Yeah.
So what he did, he sat down and he issued a receipt for a unit of wheat that already had a receipt issued for it. Now I want you to think about this. 2 receipts for 1 unit of grain. Is that honest? Is it?
Of course not.
It's not. It's dishonest. It's lying and it's stealing. Now think about that. As he issued more and more receipts for the same unit of grain, he's earning interest off those receipts. What's it cost him to create a receipt? Virtually nothing, right?
You said the word interest. This is now where it gets
Right.
really juicy, right?
Right,
Okay.
because he's creating
Yes.
money out of nothing at no expense and earning interest on it. Now, his receipts are circulating throughout the economy, right? But every time he issues another receipt, what's he doing to the value of the receipts that are already out there? He's inflating the currency, right? He's causing it to get the supply to inflate, to get bigger. And what does that do to the value of the money? It takes it down, doesn't it? So he's stealing from everybody in the economy just by virtue of the fact that he's causing the inflation, right? But he's also stealing a second time because now he's going to demand that the borrower pay him back what he created out of nothing at no expense plus interest.
Amazing. Like, so corrupt, but unfortunately brilliant.
Brilliant, okay?
Right.
And that is our banking. It's the world banking system today. Now, I could go through that same scenario, and rather than use the Babylonian grain banker, I could use the goldsmiths of the Middle Ages. Because it's the same system. You know, and I could use exactly the same wording, explain it exactly the same, but it's gold rather than wheat. Okay? It works exactly the same way.
It's all about the CDs.
It is.
Certificate of depository certificate.
Or
Basically
receipts.
paper.
Yeah.
Paper.
Yeah. Now,
Right?
in Babylon, it was probably cuneiform clay tablets.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can actually get maybe something for that because you
Yeah.
can actually hold it in your hand.
Yeah.
Like it's real instead of just paper that you can use for fire, right?
Yeah.
One little paper. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Okay, now I want to explain how it works in the United States. You know, we hear all the time, when the government deficit spends, it prints money to cover the debt, right? Don't we hear that all the time?
All the time.
Okay, now think about this. If you had the legal authority of creating money out of nothing, would you ever be in debt?
It would be so easy. Can you have that? Can you get it ready for
Well,
me?
somebody gets that.
Please. I would love to.
So if the federal government could create money out of nothing when it deficit spends, it would never be in debt. It'd just create money. But that's not the way it works. Okay? The way it works is when the federal government deficit spends, it creates a bond. And then it sells that bond, that debt instrument. Okay? Now, you or I can buy that. When we buy it, do we create new money to buy it? I can't create money. Can you?
No.
Okay, okay, I
That's what
don't.
I was asking you. How can I?
Well, you
Right?
can
You
become
got
a banker.
Printing presses.
Okay,
All right.
okay. So anyway, say the government of China buys it. They don't create new money. They take trade surplus dollars to buy government debt, U.S. government debt. Okay, but what happens if there's nobody that wants to buy that debt? The buyer of last resort is the Federal Reserve banking system. They buy the debt. Where do they get the money to buy the debt? The same place the Babylonian grain banker got it. They just create it out of nothing at no expense. Look at the bills we carry in our wallet, the things we call dollars, okay? On the top of that bill, does it say United States government note? It doesn't, does it? It says Federal Reserve note. That's the issuer of that note, okay? Now, people will then say, well, the Federal Reserve's just part of the federal government. No, it's not. There are 12 Federal Reserve banks. Each of the 12 banks is owned by the member commercial banks in that bank's district. They have to subscribe. Now, I want to say this. About half of the commercial banks are members of the Federal Reserve. About half are not. It's their choice. They can be a member or not. But they have to live by the rules of the Federal Reserve, whether they're members or not.
Okay.
Okay? They subscribe 6% of their capital to buy stock in the Federal Reserve Bank, and they get a 6% annual dividend on that stock. Well, now, can you put your money in a savings account in a bank and get 6% interest?
I think back in the day, maybe our grandparents, that used to be the thing, right?
Yeah.
You keep your money in the bank and then
Yeah.
you get interest for giving
Yeah.
them money. Now, in some, you got to pay.
Right, right. In some European countries, if you have a savings account, you pay them to store your money. A lot of Americans don't realize. That's coming here, by the way. It's going to come.
Well, yeah, I agree. I just look at it like, for instance, if you're using like, what is it called, Zelle, when you can transfer money or
Yeah.
whatever, they say you gotta, like Chase Bank would tell you have to have a certain amount, let's say $25,000, it's gotta be a business account, then you don't have to pay this, but they'll charge you like a $15 fee for the minimum amount.
Yeah.
They got their ways
Oh,
for
yeah.
you to actually pay them to hold your money.
Yeah.
So I do have one question, but you can answer it later before you finish.
Okay,
what you
let
said.
me
Yeah,
finish
I
this.
don't want to
Okay.
forget this
Okay.
question.
Okay, so how can I put this? Let's just take our bills, our dollar bills, 5s, 10s, okay. To the cost, the printing cost to print a dollar bill, a 5 or a 10, and this changes with inflation, it always goes up, but it's about 7 cents. Wouldn't you like to print a 1 or a 10 for 7 cents and spend it for $1 or $10? That's a pretty good, okay? So who gets that difference between the printing cost and the bill? Okay? Is that the federal government? No, it's not. The federal government, Department of Printing and Engraving, prints the money and then gives it, or I shouldn't say gives it, sells it to the privately owned Federal Reserve banks for the cost of printing. So the entity that gets that money basically for nothing is not the federal government, it's the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank. Now, 20s, 50s, 100s, 500s, that may be the biggest bill they make now, I don't know. They cost about 17 cents to print because
Okay.
there's extra secure, there's little strips in there that are extra. So who gets that? Again, it's the Fed. The printing and engraving prints it, it goes to the Fed. Now, I've said that to say this. Most money is not held as currency. It's only a tiny fraction of the money that's held as currency. Most money is held as digital entries. It's just an entry on a computer bank. For example, when the federal government borrows from the Fed, the way it happens is the Fed credits the government's checking account just by adding a computer entry on the computer banks. And then the federal government can then use that money, in most cases digitally, to pay their bills. They can pay a private in the Army, a road contractor, a welfare check, whatever, okay? But remember, when the Fed created that money, it was loaned to the government at interest and has to be paid back by the government to the privately owned Fed with interest. Now, where does the government get that money?
Great question.
Okay, well, I can tell
Yes.
you, they get it from you.
Exactly. We the people.
Okay.
The working class.
So we are working to pay multi-billionaire international bankers that created the national debt out of nothing at no expense. And we are paying them what they created plus interest. Now, do we ever make any progress on getting them paid off? No. As the debt compounds, we just get deeper and deeper in debt. And in addition to that, there's additional deficit spending that puts us even deeper in debt to these international bankers that own the Fed. Okay, now that's level one. There's actually two levels where money's created in the United States. The second level is at the commercial banking level. Now that's, say you go to the bank to get a loan to buy a house or a car or whatever. Where's the bank get the money? Well, let me tell you what everybody thinks. They think that savers put money in a savings account and they're paid, say, well, in the old days, they were paid about 4%. And then the bank would loan it out at, say, 6%. And so the bank would make their profit off the difference. But what can you get on a savings account today? I don't know, what is it, 0.2%?
Yeah, it's basically it's zero.
It's almost nothing. As a result of that, almost nobody puts hardly anything in savings accounts. You'd be stupid to do that. You know, say they're paying you 0.2% and inflation is running 8%, you're losing buying power.
It's a for sure loss.
It's a for sure loss.
Nothing is more for sure than that.
You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, the Bible describes that process as putting your money in a purse with a hole in it. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're losing money by putting your money. So nobody's doing it. But the banks are making loans, aren't they?
All the time.
So where do they get the money? Well, let me tell you how it works at the commercial banking level. Remember, we operate under fractional reserve banking, okay?
Can you tell us real quick what does that really mean?
It means that the bank
10 to 1?
it was 10 to 1, okay? And I'll have to, it was for a long time. It was about 10 to 1 and it varies some, okay? It's now, they don't need anything, okay? There's no limit, okay? But let's just use 10 to 1 because it was used historically for a long time. If the bank had average daily balance in its clients' checking accounts of $1 million, it could loan out $10 million. And you go, well, wait a minute. Where did they get that extra money? They get it the same place the Babylonian grain banker got it. They created they basically write a check on themselves. When that check is given to the borrower, the new money comes into existence. Now, all money is created by banks at one of those two levels. And this is pretty well worldwide. There's a few exceptions to that. All money is loaned into existence at interest, has to be paid back to the money creator plus interest. How do you pay the money creator more money than he has created? You see a problem here?
It is so bad. It is, but at the same time, like we said, brilliant.
Yeah,
like
but
what they're doing.
Here's the only way the system can work. Somebody has to make a bigger loan later in time. Because as the principal is paid back, think about this, the Babylonian grain banker. You borrowed grain from him or a receipt. When you pay him back, you can pay him back in what? Grain or his receipt. If you pay him back with his receipt, what's that worth to him? It's trash.
Yeah.
It's just trash. He tears it up.
Paper.
Yeah.
It's nothing. Yeah.
He tears it up and throws. So when you pay the bank back, the principal is destroyed. It was only a debt accounting entry anyway. It goes out of existence. So there has to be constantly bigger loans made later in time to keep the Ponzi scheme going.
And that's exactly what it is.
And
It's
that's
a
what it is.
professional, as good as it gets, Ponzi scheme. And I'm going to leave the part 2 with you today,
Okay.
Charlie, for this one, to finish this video, because I got a question that is going to connect the dots with what's going on right now with the Silicon Valley Bank and other banks globally that are going under as we speak. That's why I was so excited to have you on today as a historian and understand, and you are the one that can break this down for an average person, and even those that follow economics, they just can't seem to wrap their head around what is going on here. And we know in schools they don't teach this.
No, they don't.
Okay? MBA, they don't teach about this.
No.
Okay?
No.
So I want to go back into part 2 in a few minutes. For those that like this video, I hope you did. Share it and like it. And we're going to do part 2 to connect the dots, what's going on today and what's to come. We are out and we're going to start in a little bit.